Australia is a country of opportunity for criminals who need to launder money and to stash the proceeds of crime.
There are 50% more tumours in the province of Naples than in the whole of Italy.
Welcome back to the Mafia's Web. I'm Stephen Drill. I've spent the past 2 years looking at the Italian Mafia and their links to Australia. This podcast investigates how the Mafia's tactics have changed and what, if anything, can be done to stop them. In this episode, I'm looking at how the Mafia is handling the pandemic. Winston Churchill is often incorrectly quoted as saying, "Never waste a good crisis." It was actually Barack Obama's chief of staff who's credited with coining that term. But the Mafia didn't need to rely on cliched quotes to make the most of the coronavirus pandemic. Mafia expert Antonio Nicaso, who's based in Canada, says the pandemic has been good for bad business.
They always were able to exploit the crisis, opportunities, pandemic, earthquakes. We have so many evidence that they are doing exactly the same during this pandemic. They are in some way purchasing failing companies. They are trying to obtain more social consensus with a kind of alternative form of welfare.
The difference this time is the scale of the crisis. COVID-19 has smashed the world's economy. At least 115 million people across the world lost their jobs in 2020. And with lockdowns continuing, despite the rollout of vaccines, more pain is to come. And that is fertile ground for the Mafia.
The generosity of organized crime groups has always a purpose. The logic is I scratch your back and then you scratch my back. The idea to provide food, to provide help to some people is a great opportunity for criminals to say that when times arrive, I may need your help, and you can convert this kind of generosity, this kind of alternative welfare in political support when criminals need to gather votes to support their own candidate or candidate that with the norms of reciprocity help criminals to achieve their goals.
But the Mafia now is just so powerful. The biggest Mafia family, the 'Ndrangheta, is estimated to turn over 100 billion euros each year. That's 150 billion, not million, Australian dollars. And that kind of money can buy a lot of influence. The Mafia's power has grown so big that their cash is propping up financial markets. And now they are on the hunt for bargains.
So it's quite possible, because this is a strategy that they always use. For example, drug money worth billions of dollars kept the financial system afloat during the 2008 global crisis. They were the only liquid investment capital available to some banks on the brink of collapse. So drug profits were absorbed into the economic system as a result. It's quite possible that they are using the same system in Australia too. I don't have any evidence to say that they are providing a kind of alternative welfare. It's exactly the same in Canada. We don't have any evidence that they are providing support to family in need in Canada too. But I believe that the strategy, when you have money, when you have liquid investment capital, the idea that they can purchase failing companies, that they can offer collateral to a businessman that's looking for bank credits, or money, not necessarily with the system of loan sharking, but with the idea to in some way provide a kind of support to businessmen with the same logic. I help you now that you are in need, and then you will help me when I need you. I think it's a strategy that they can apply everywhere, worldwide.
The Mafia also know a good wicket when they see one. Australia had JobKeeper, Britain had furlough money, and Italy had cash for the unemployed due to COVID. The Mafia also have legitimate businesses, and they weren't shy about putting their hand up for government money.
In Italy and in many other countries of Europe, this is happening right now. They are taking advantage of all the stimulus fund through legitimate business, but they are taking advantage of the money that the government is providing for people without a job. So imagine they can be involved in drug trafficking, but they still pretend to be in a. There is an investigation in Italy that uncovered that so many mobsters exploited the legislation that provide some money, like 250 euros per month to people without a job.
Most office workers had to switch to working from home during lockdowns, but the Mafia's drug trafficking continued apace, even though some of the demand dried up, with nightclubs closed and parties stopped. The Mafia also see Australia as a prime target for money laundering.
Australia is a country of opportunity for criminals who need to launder money and to stash the proceeds of crime. And that's what they are looking for. They're looking for opportunities. They're looking for opportunities, especially if you take under consideration that since the pandemic, the drug business has undergone various changes. But I don't think that suffer like many other sectors of the economy. There has been an increase in the price of illegal drugs because, for example, it is harder to import the chemical precursors from China, but they diversify the routes. They change routes. For example, in Italy, instead to use the Gioia Tauro ports in Calabria during the first lockdown, they prefer seaports such as the one in Spain or in the Netherlands. Now it's back to normalcy. Recently, 1.3 tons of cocaine have been seized in Calabria, the port of Gioia Tauro. But this is just an example of their strategy. They had to adapt to the lockdown, so they had to change, for example, the delivery method. Sometimes they use riders, they use private cabs, but the drug trafficking did not stop during pandemic. So in terms of the money, they are not in a very difficult situation like many companies. So they do have money available to invest in the economy.
Although Australia has dealt with the Mafia for almost a century, Antonio says our police have not always had the best strategy. He says the Mafia were underestimated.
I remember I published the first book about Ndrangheta in Australia in 1994. I think the approach was wrong in the past. The idea that they were a bunch of Italians. I think the idea of the alien conspiracy, the idea of considered the organized crime an ethnic problem was one of the main issue. If you like to understand what the Mafia is all about, you have to consider an important aspect that sociologists called human capital. And when you run a criminal organization, you need to bonding social capital, but at the same time you need to bridging social capital. And when I say bridging, is to connect the underworld to the upper world, and that's what the mafia is all about. The idea that they are able to corrupt the people, to hire professionals, to infiltrate institutions, including some politicians, and that's is the hard part in understanding mafia and mafia-like criminal organization. They are not just a bunch of violent people, but they are people with a network of trust. That's what the mafia is all about. The ability to create a network, a criminal network, a power system. And I think that was not understood in Australia, because the approach, at least when I explore for the first time the history of the Ndrangheta in Australia, the first impression was that on one side there was the Australian society, and the other side this strange world of the people that belong to an old and ancient criminal organization, a kind of clash between cultures. Instead, if you want to understand what the mafia is all about, you have to take under consideration the idea that they are enemies within, not enemies without, enemies that are coming from outside.
The mafia's strength comes from their ability to infiltrate institutions, particularly politics. It's a two-sided coin. The violence creates the fear, but the political capital oils the wheels of organised crime. Antonio says Australian politicians should be on notice.
And I think if you analyze the latest development of the Ndrangheta, you clearly see that it's an organization well connected to the social elite, to political parties. It's clear that they are able to corrupt people, to use the strategy that we mentioned before. I scratch your back, you scratch my back. That is the attitude. And it's not different of the strategy that the Ndrangheta have been used in Italy and in any other countries in Europe or in North or South America.
The tactics of the mafia are also changing. There is still violence, but the Ndrangheta, that's the biggest mafia clan, they want to avoid headlines where possible. They have made themselves into businessmen, hiding their crimes in plain sight. And you don't want people seeing blood on your hands when you're breaking bread with the top end of town.
When I studied the documents of the time in the early 1990s, the Ndrangheta was one of many players that operated in Australia. I remember Mr. Asia's syndicate and many others, in the ability of those criminal groups to work together, to establish criminal partnership. Of course, when you're thinking about cocaine, you're thinking to a profitable market. If the Ndrangheta is putting into the account the idea to ship cocaine to Australia because they can make more money, of course the risk is higher because you have to ship the cocaine from Colombia, Bolivia, Peru to Australia. But the reward, it's huge because the cost on the street it's uncomparable to the cost on the street in Europe and in North America. So I think many players, including the Sinaloa cartels and the Mexican cartels in general, the Jalisco cartel of a new generation, now they are targeting Australia because it's a kind of pot in terms of profit.
Agile is the buzzword in the corporate world. Any business now, particularly in tech, will tell you that you have to innovate. The Mafia have surfed that wave too. They are becoming the Uber for drugs. Major deals are now sorted out online on the dark web.
They have this strategy that help them out over the years. There is an old Sicilian proverb that perfectly describes the current situation. Bend down the rush until the flood has passed. And so they are capable to adapt. They are capable to keep a low profile when they need. So I think there is a kind of a change in their strategy, and we see that changes worldwide. In a conversation intercepted in Italy, a mobster was talking with another one, and he clearly stated, "We don't need people that are able to shoot. We need people that are able to work on a computer." And so they mention this aspect clearly, that they're looking to people to explore new frontiers such as the cybercrimes. Imagine the evolution from gaming houses to the online pokers, to the illegal betting through internet, or the idea that they can sell narcotics through an illegal market on the deep web. Police started to uncover some plot, but they started to listen conversation during which Drangheta brokers are willing to pay narcotics with bitcoins, and fully capable to use the deep web, not directly, but through people that they can hire.
The new wave of mafia bosses are also going digital with their payments. Bitcoins are the currency of choice for some. They are supposedly untraceable and much easier to deal with than suitcases of cash. El Salvador, a poor country in Central America, has also made Bitcoin an official currency.
And on Wednesday, the government announced Bitcoin would become legal tender. Supporters of the measure say the new law represents a vote of confidence in using blockchain technology to bring informal sector workers into a 21st century economy.
And as Elon Musk tweeted, Bitcoin is one hell of a drug. Now it's being considered as legal tender in El Salvador. CNBC.com's Mackenzie Sigalos joined us from the Bitcoin conference on Friday and is with us now.
Therefore, the law of Bitcoin is approved.
Bitcoiners around the world, the time has come. We are ready. We did our part. Now the ball is on your side.
But with one Bitcoin worth more than 45,000 Australian dollars, I wonder if the criminals will be more likely to trade with the Bitcoins than poor El Salvadorian farmers.
In one operation conducted in Europe, was an operation that was the result of a collaboration among 4 European countries, including Italy. They arrested several people. One of them was intercepted while he offered to some Colombian drug traffickers to pay for a shipment of cocaine with bitcoins. That was not the first instance, but was an important instance, because it showed the ability of the Ndrangheta to adapt to new situation. I remember an investigation of 1980s when the police uncovered that some brokers of the Ndrangheta were paying the cocaine with diamonds that they purchased in South Africa. So that was one of the first time that they start to use commodities to pay for narcotics, and then they explore so many other opportunities.
As well as exploiting struggling businesses in the pandemic, the Mafia is also looking to new markets. Antonio mentioned online casinos earlier, but the Mafia's reach into gambling is much, much deeper. When I was growing up, the only thing you could bet on was horses. And to do that, you had to go to a smoky TAB and put the bets on in person. The growth of online bookies and betting on more sports has become a lucrative sideline for the Mafia. And the chance to fix the outcome makes it even more attractive for them. But this trade has already come to the attention of authorities.
The police uncovered that the Ndrangheta incorporated many companies in Malta, and they used those companies to run websites capable to provide any kind of services, from the online gaming to the illegal betting to corrupt sport events, to infiltrate the world of sport. So I think the main issue is that they are working together along with other criminal groups. They are borderless, and on the other side, the fight against organized crime is restrained by sovereignty, by different legislation, from different approach and cultures, and that is the main problem. The mafia is going global. The anti-mafia is still restrained into the border of a country, and it's more difficult to collaborate if you have different legislations. For example, consider the country of the common law. They are not willing to introduce or to criminalize the membership because it's against their culture. There is no way that you can replicate the anti-mafia legislation. In Italy, if someone is a member of a criminal organization, can be charged and convicted just because for what it is. In many other countries, of especially the one of the common law, you can charge a person for what he does, not for what he is.
So we know the Mafia has diversified into online gambling, but it's not above getting its hands dirty. There's the violence, the killings, the blood feuds between gangs, but then there is commercial waste. And in the sign of just how little regard they have for their own people, they dumped the waste in their own backyard. It's time to meet John Hughes Wilson. John is a British military intelligence veteran and a historian. He says the Mafia's commercial waste dumping has caused a catastrophe in Italy.
The Italian cancer research offers this is down in Naples, offers quite sober findings. There are 50% more tumours in the province of Naples than in the whole of Italy. Campania in the south has the highest infertility rate in Italy and the most cases of severe autism. Now that has almost certainly come from the poisons in the soil there, but that's just in Italy. If we then look at Somalia, we discover that when the ships were scuttled off Somalia secretly by the Ndrangheta, I think it's 2004, there was a big tsunami, and it blew a lot of these containers ashore, and it's actually caused absolute havoc in Somalia, which is effectively a failed state. And the illegal dumping of toxic waste has brought all kinds of medical problems. For example, all the usual things, double births, deformation, sickness, every acute illness and defects, birth defects, absence of limbs, widespread cancers. One Somali doctor said, since the stuff came ashore, the drums came ashore leaking of toxic waste, he'd treated more cases of cancer in 1 year than he had in his entire professional career.
John says that despite the carnage that has been reported, the Mafia has continued their deadly trade. And he blames poor economic conditions in countries like Somalia, but also in Italy, for allowing their awful trade to continue.
I mean, you see the same thing going on in Italy. The 'Ndrangheta are now firmly entrenched in northern Italy. They've bought politicians, and one of their tricks is, and COVID, for example, has been a huge benefit to the mob in southern Italy.
Why is that, John? What's the benefit of COVID to them?
Well, let's give you an example. Restaurants are going out of business for obvious reasons, because they've been told to by the government. So in a place like southern Italy, Calabria is effectively a failed state within Italy. If you look at the WikiLeaks telegrams, the American ambassador called Calabria a failed state within Italy.
The problem was only getting worse in Italy. And when things get worse there, they will get worse here. You see, the power of the Mafia clans in Italy feeds into their power and connections in Australia. When the pandemic is over, the Mafia will be even bigger. They will own more legitimate businesses, and that will allow them to launder their money. And with that money, they can buy more power.
If you're running a business and you've been told to keep it closed by the government, which is what's happened all over Europe, if you're a poor restaurant owner down in southern Italy, your family is going hungry. We're not talking about downtown London here. We're talking about primitive, fairly primitive, backward communities. And so along come, and this is the 'Ndrangheta's great trick, they come along as generous people. They are men of honor. And they come along to poor old Carlos and say, your restaurant's in trouble, we'll buy it from you. And he, of course, is grateful. He sells it for a fair price. And the 'Ndrangheta have now got a legitimate business, another legitimate business, to launder money. The other trick they pull is to offer him a loan. And once he signs up to that loan, he's on the hook to them for life.
The 'Ndrangheta, that powerful Mafia clan, are seen in Italy as more than just a gang. Some locals think they run the country better than the politicians do.
The tentacles of this criminal organisation, which is much worse than the Mafia because this one's based entirely on family and blood, go right through Italy now. They see themselves as an alternative government. For example, down in Palermo, the government was sending money for food in the COVID crisis. Guess where that was going? Into the pockets of officials. Along come the 'Ndrangheta and they say, we'll help you have a food parcel. They are more efficient than the government in helping local people, and local people are grateful.
John fears that southern Italy will always be a Mafia magnet because the government there cannot get its act together. And that just shores up the foundations of the worldwide Mafia empires.
There's no question in Italy, and these are harsh words and I make no apology for them, there's no question of going back to a well-organised state. There's never been a well-organised state. And you and I know, and many listeners will know, that Italy is a jigsaw of other states. Savoy in the north, the Kingdom of Savoy, where the King of Savoy was thought to, he should really be the King of Italy. You've got the old papal states, you've got Rome, you've got Lombardy in the north, which is now totally infiltrated by the 'Ndrangheta, down to Calabria and Sicily. They've never, ever got a history of pulling together.
There is an extra layer to that division in Italy. the extreme divide of wealth between the north and the south. As I've said earlier, I have seen how poor some parts of Italy are. The mafia sits on billions of dollars, but the locals never see a penny. But Italy may be a victim of its own crackdown. A mafia boss revealed a tactic in court.
He clearly indicated that the target, the goal of the 'Ndrangheta is not to invest money in Calabria, but to invest money outside of Calabria, where it is easier to launder money because of lax legislation, because of more opportunity, and that's the focus. For example, the two individuals were charged because they tried to incorporate 15 companies in the UK, 15 companies in the city of London. That was a strategy to launder money, but at the same time to pretend that they were involved in the import-export business. That's what they are trying to do. If you analyze the economy of Calabria is one of the poorest regions of Europe. In Calabria remain the breadcrumbs of the huge profits of narcotics run by the 'Ndrangheta. The overwhelming majority of profit goes around the world. They invested in countries such as Australia, Canada, Germany, England, and many other places, important places around the world.
So the cash goes out of Calabria, that poor part of southern Italy where the mafia are in control. The politicians get paid and the people stay poor. It's almost like a feudal system where the lord of the manor controls the lives of his serfs. And this whole impenetrable system allows the mafia to set up shop, invest and profit from illegal operations in Australia. But given such a scale, what can the Australian authorities do? As I was making this podcast, I knew about the mafia trial in southern Italy. 300 men who prosecutors say are mafia dons were appearing in a trial on Zoom. But what very few people in the world knew was that there was something bigger bubbling away.
Just really peculiar instances where you see just how far deep down the tentacles of the mafia go in aspects of everyday life that you wouldn't ever imagine.
But more on that in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. This podcast was hosted by me, Stephen Drill, and produced by Andrea Teese-Evanson. Please follow and subscribe to this podcast on whatever app you are listening through, and leave a rating and review if you can to help spread the word.